Welcome back to Armour Week. As we get closer to Oz Armour Fest, we're going to talk about one of the coolest and most amazing armoured vehicles to ever be put into service. A vehicle so versatile that it's become used as an ambulance, troop transport, assault vehicle, and in one particular case, the spearhead of a massive Ukrainian offensive that rolled back the Russian line in Kharkiv. Welcome to the Bushy, or as the diggers put it, the battle taxi. Put simply, the Bushmaster Protected Mobility Vehicle, PMV, or just Bushmaster for short, is a four-wheel drive armoured vehicle designed and built in Australia. The Bushy comes purely from the need of a vehicle to protect soldiers during the War on Terror, and it first was engineered by the government-owned Australian Defence Industries, or ADI. Today, though, it is manufactured by Towers Australia, which absorbed ADI after acquiring the company. The Bushmaster is very new compared to a lot of the other armoured vehicles running around the world today, only being introduced in 1997, and in short order it has become one of Australia's most successful defence exports, or really defence projects in general. There have been more than 1,300 vehicles built as of 2025, and there are more coming. Even a new all-electric version, which naturally got mocked online, was announced and prototyped. And it's easy to mock it, being, electric armoured vehicle. That is until you realise that electric motors are silent, and that means this honking great big black armoured battering ram can approach you in the pitch black, full of SAS, in the middle of the night, in silence, which is terrifying. The Bushmaster hasn't just become iconic for Australia too, because it's received orders from the Netherlands, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Japan, Indonesia, Fiji, and Jamaica. It's also been supplied to Ukraine in large numbers following Russia's invasion in 2022, and I'll come back to this one later on because good lord has done work in Ukraine that was never even remotely designed of or dreamed of being able to do. The Bushmaster can trace its roots all the way back to the 1991 Australian Defence Review, which identified the need for a dedicated infantry mobility vehicle. A 94 white paper committed to this new land force vehicle, and the resulting acquisition effort was given the uniquely Australian name of Project Bushranger. Now, for the Yanks watching, a Bushranger, think like a cowboy, our version of that. It's a bit more complex and nuanced, but for simplest sake, think a cowboy. The purpose of the project was to research both armoured and non-armoured infantry vehicles to figure out what kind of design would be best going forward. See, Australia was in kind of a difficult spot here when it came to infantry transport, because for the most part we still use the old M113, which, mind you, we still have a lot in service today, and they're slowly being replaced with the Redback over the next few years. While Project Bushranger continued though, an interim fleet of unarmoured vehicles, essentially Land Rovers, filled the gap starting in 93. The vehicle's core mission is to move infantry safely through hostile terrain, while shielding them from small arms fire. It is not designed to actually fight armoured things. The idea was that the soldiers dismount before engaging in combat, kind of like the old light horse cavalry that we employed. Well, except for the one time they decided to stuff it and charge the Ottomans in a massive cavalry charge with their bayonets because they didn't have swords because they were never meant to use their horses in combat. But, and here's the big but, the M113 and the Jeeps and, well, the horses in the olden days, they weren't going to cut it. And slowly the new ASLAV would be introduced as a larger, fast-moving, relatively heavy armoured vehicle, but that still left the issue of infantry mobility on a larger scale, and it's here that the Bushmaster steps up. Formal specifications for the new vehicle came out in 1994, and it drew from 17 proposals incorporating designs from around the world. Perry Engineering's early prototype drew on Irish designs, with suspension technology, and it used a large share of components including engines and transmissions from US military truck families. They built it in under 7 months, and the prototype impressed everyone enough that ADI purchased the intellectual property from Perry Engineering's parent company in 96, and they set to work tinkering. By 97, the Bushmaster and the Taipan, a military vehicle based on an old South Africa concept, remained in contention for the contract. ADI reworked the Bushmaster's hull shape and internal design later that year to improve blast resistance, and in 1998, 3 examples of each finalist underwent a lengthy 44-week evaluation trial. Neither design satisfied every requirement, but in March 1999, ADI won the contract to build the Bushmaster at its facility in Bendigo, Victoria, reaching just enough for the requirements that it got the contract. The cool thing about the Bushmaster that makes it different is that it answers the same question that other vehicles like the MRAP answer. It's built around defending the crew and passengers from, put simply, IEDs/landmines. It is built around a V-shaped hull that channels the force of a mine or IED blast away from the crew compartment, sacrificing the wheels and mobility in order to save the lives inside. The armour of the vehicle itself is designed only to actually defend against 7.62 and other small arms ammunition, mortar fragments, and Claymore-type anti-personnel mines. This vehicle is not designed to fight tanks, or even things like a Bradley. Fuel and hydraulic systems sit outside the crew compartment, and the vehicle includes an automatic fire suppression system should a fire kick off inside. It typically seats one driver and up to 9 passengers, and it's capable of carrying a section of troops along with 3 days worth of fuel and supplies. Now, a lot of people think that this vehicle was purely designed to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, and if you were listening on to what I've said, you may think that as well, but it's simply not true. It's actually a design tailored for operations across Northern Australia, be it in the Northern Territory, in the desert, or up in the top end of Queensland or WA, which is coincidentally where 3 major military bases are that we don't actively staff unless they're needed. Wild, that. What a little coincidence that is. The Bushmaster can speed along at 100 km an hour with an operational range for roughly 800 km, and it's perfect for these conditions. Armament options for the Bushy also include very, very different options depending on what you want it to do. They can include a forward-mounted machine gun and a rear-mounted swivel mount for 7.62 weapons, or if the unit is feeling particularly violent that day, they can fit a remote weapon system carrying weapons up to a 40mm grenade launcher or heavy machine guns. The vehicle is also designed to be air transportable aboard the C-130 Hercules and the C-17 Globemaster, which, by the way, are the exact aircraft the Royal Australian Air Force use. And one thing about the Bushmaster that's kind of incredible, that sets it in a unique position, is that it is the only armoured fighting vehicle entirely designed and assembled in Australia since the AC-1 Sentinel in World War II. Australia first ordered 299 of these vehicles, but the design proved so successful and so adaptable that by 2008 the order had risen to 737. Further orders in 2011 and 2012 pushed the fleet past 1,000. And anyone who has lived near a military base will see these vehicles on almost a daily basis. Hell, my high school was on the road to a military base, and we saw probably 24 a week. Deliveries, which began in 2005, ran years behind the original schedule though, but things have improved, and orders have again started to pick up, as Australia has donated older models to Ukraine, meaning that the ADF is now getting fancy new ones out of the Bendigo factory. Modern Bushmasters have even been fitted with command and control duties, sporting the HIMARS rocket systems and drone warfare. And as of 25, Australia has submitted an order which gives the Bushmasters a new land-based anti-ship missile capability. Just this year, in April 2026, Australia has committed roughly $780 million to 268 next-gen Bushmasters. In short, this vehicle is going to be the backbone of the Australian Army's transportation for decades to come, and the design has proven itself remarkably adaptable to modern needs and requirements in the drone age. The Bushmaster's combat debut would actually come with 2 prototypes deployed to East Timor in '99 as part of an international task force. I won't go too far into it, but the last few decades has seen Australia take a keen interest in protecting East Timor as a key regional ally, ensuring essentially that it doesn't get eaten by Indonesia. We do something similar for a lot of the Pacific nations around us. It's politically smart to keep them close, as essentially they're not puppet states, which is what they're often referred to by certain media sources, but they are close regional allies, and they are vital to our defence, and by defending them, we defend ourselves. It's the same reason we give them free patrol boats. They are able to protect themselves and their own waters, which means that we don't have to pay to do it, which means that their safety equals our safety. It's just basic politics. But, back to that. The original Bushmaster debut in East Timor went quite well. And then the Bushmaster later saw extended service with Australian forces in Iraq from 2005 onwards, and in Afghanistan from 2005 to 2013, where it became a mainstay of the reconstruction and mentoring task force operations. In one notable 2010 incident, a Bushmaster struck a roadside bomb in Uruzgan province and it was the kind of IED that had it hit the old Jeeps that were being used or Land Rovers, every single person inside would have died. In the Bushmaster, though, everyone was fine. 3 were seriously wounded, but they did make it. By 2011, 31 Bushies had been damaged beyond repair in Afghanistan, out of a maximum in-country force of any one time of 104 hulls. But again, the death toll and the injury rate was incredibly limited to what it could have been. The Netherlands at this point as well became an early and major operator of the type, purchasing vehicles urgently in 2006 for its forces in Afghanistan. It steadily expanded its fleet through further orders into the 2010s, eventually accumulating close to 100 vehicles, used it for everything from troop transportation to explosive ordnance disposal and electronic warfare. Dutch Bushmasters saw combat losses in Afghanistan, but the vehicle did its job and the Dutch army were huge fans of it, later deploying Bushmasters on peacekeeping operations to Mali. In April 2026 too, Australia announced the Netherlands would receive an additional undisclosed number of vehicles as part of a new export agreement. The British Army, meanwhile, acquired 24 of the heavily modified Bushmasters known as Escapades in 2008 for their special forces in Iraq. These vehicles later saw further use during the Battle of Mosul and the Battle of Raqqa, playing key roles in British SAS operations in the region. Meanwhile, a little closer to home, New Zealand, Japan, Fiji and Indonesia have all added Bushmasters or Bushmaster-derived vehicles to their forces, with Indonesia producing its own variant called the Sangka under license through a partnership between Tails and Pindad. Yes, Indonesia getting the Bushmasters is somewhat funny considering the Bushmasters deploying to East Timor played a role in keeping that country independent and stable. Technically against Indonesia, but the modern era makes interesting allies. Interestingly too, Jamaica has actually put orders in and received Bushmasters for the Jamaican Defence Force in recent years as well. The most significant contribution to the conflict by the Bushmaster, though, began in April 2022, following an address to both houses of the Australian Parliament by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky by name requested Bushmasters to help the Ukrainians in their fight for independence against the Russian invaders, and in short order Australia began donating Bushmasters to Ukraine's armed forces. Successive announcements through 2022 and 23 have seen Australia donate 120 vehicles across 5 batches. Ukrainian officials have praised the vehicle's battlefield performance, though Zelensky also noted troops were pressing Bushmasters into roles resembling IFVs. And this is not something the Bushmaster was designed to do. It was not designed to stand and fight. It's a transportation vehicle with a bit of armour to protect the crew, mostly against landmines. And because of these pressing into service into roles it's not designed for, there have been significant losses. Between 10 and 40 are reported to have been destroyed, depending on what reports you believe. Up to 3 have also been captured by Russians too, and one was even put on a fancy little display in Moscow showing all the nations that Russia doesn't like, aka all the civilized nations of the world, which makes you proud to be Australian, honestly. The most amazing use of the Bushi in Ukraine, though, just has to be its use during the 2022 Kharkiv counteroffensive. Ukrainian forces managed to essentially snap the Russian line on the 7th of September, advancing over 20 kilometers and forcing Russian soldiers to flee en masse in a chaotic retreat to the east. Ukrainian forces were able to capture Izium, Kupiansk, and the Oskil River, pushing the Russians back 70 kilometers and relieving pressure from the city of Kharkiv, liberating 12,000 square kilometers of land. Of course, hundreds of vehicles were involved, but leading the charge on some of these spearheads was the battle taxi, which is mental to think about because it's not built for that at all. And it's essentially a big bus with armor built in Bendigo, leading the charge across the steppe. It's kind of wild to consider that. Beyond the standard troop carrier variant, the Bushmaster also includes command, ambulance, mortar, air defense, assault pioneer, and utility variants, along with specialized IED interrogation vehicles fitted with robotic arms and sensors. Civilian and non-military adaptations have also emerged, including the Fire King firefighting version, used by a South Australian forestry agency, and a one-off deployment by VicPol, Victoria Police. Tails has also continued to push the platform forward in terms of capability, with a 6-wheeled variant being developed unsuccessfully to compete for US military contracts. The all-electric prototype I mentioned was unveiled in 2022, and there has also been a left-hand drive variant invented that is aimed specifically at the European market. Keep in mind we drive on the left in Australia and the driving seat's on the right, so it's essentially reversed for the European market. Like I mentioned too before, the Bushmaster has also been adapted as a mobile launch platform, with a version called Strikemaster tested in 2025 in Norway, as part of Australia's deployment of a land-based anti-ship missile capability. Nearly 3 decades after its first prototype was built, the Bushy remains one of just the flat-out coolest little vehicles in production that has repeatedly punched well above its weight, and by all accounts it has an exceptionally long future ahead. It would not shock me, and this is not just national pride speaking and bias because I think it's cool, to see a future where the Bushy is adopted by other nations, dozens of other nations, who are after a cost-effective way that is proven to protect their soldiers, particularly in a future war where drones and mines are going to play a significant part. Look, I could chat about the Bushy for a lot longer than this, but I hope you all enjoyed this little video and Armour Week. And if you have, like, comment, subscribe, hype the video, and I will see you again tomorrow.
Wow.